Hi guys, it's good to be here to talk about movies. Just letting you know, there will be spoilers in this video.
Everything they've built will fall! And from the ashes of their world, we'll build a better one!
Okay, so today I'm going to talk about 2016's X-Men Apocalypse. It's about the X-Men taking on their most dangerous enemy yet, a mutant from ancient Egypt known as En-Sabah Nur. This is the third installment of the trilogy that started with X-Men First Class. Like its predecessors, First Class and Days of Future Past, it centers around Charles Xavier, Mystique, and Magneto. This film also features younger versions of some of the original X-Men: Cyclops, Storm, Jean Grey, and Nightcrawler. As a huge X-Men fan, I gotta admit, I was quite let down with this film, especially after seeing Days of Future Past. This movie had so much potential. Instead, it's just a giant bag of missed opportunities. I will say that it's not as bad as the critics on Rotten Tomatoes say. However, it's not great. Most of the actors in the movie are great. It's the creative choices that I didn't agree with, the first being the look of Apocalypse himself. And yeah, I'm glad the final look of the character didn't turn out like this. Don't get me wrong, his armor is cool. Its Egyptian design works for the character. However, for some reason, the filmmakers decided to make him completely blue. At the end of Days of Future Past, they teased him with gray skin and red eyes and blue lips, like he is in the comics. And I understand that the version of the character transfers his mind into a new body to extend his life and gain more abilities. It still doesn't make sense though. This may not seem like a big issue, but it makes him look silly, and adds to the number of blue characters in the franchise, which at this point is sort of comical and ridiculous.
Now I'm with this guy. The blue guy.
I feel like if they would have given him gray skin and red eyes, it would have been a much better approach to the character. I also think Oscar Isaac is a great actor, but they should have made Apocalypse bigger in appearance. They could have used different camera angles to make him seem taller, or simply made him bigger digitally. When he's standing among his horsemen, you can really see how small he is in comparison. And he's supposed to be this powerful, godlike presence, and yet some of his horsemen are towering over him. He doesn't look physically imposing like he should. Also, when they do close-ups of his face, you can easily see how plastic and fake it looks. It's distracting, and it takes you out of the film. Okay, now on to the character of Apocalypse, or as the movie only ever refers to him, as
En-Sabah Nur.
As I mentioned before, Oscar Isaac is a great actor, and I truly believe he made the best out of what was given to him. But there's simply nothing to the character. The delivery was great, but what he was saying comes off as annoying and repetitive.
Together, we will cleanse the earth.
Everything they've built will fall! And from the ashes of their world, we'll build a better one!
He's a common, flat villain that wants to rule the world just because. I feel like the film didn't do a good enough job establishing that Apocalypse's entire philosophy is about survival of the fittest. There were a few throwaway lines here and there, but they never chose to delve into it, which was a shame because that's Apocalypse's whole thing in the comics. There also wasn't any real explanation of his past other than the vague biblical references. That being said, the character does have cool moments every now and then. I will say that one of my favorite scenes with him is when he took control of Cerebro to disarm all the world's nuclear weapons. I found his speech intimidating, and it really helped the audience see his godlike complex that's on display.
You can fire your arrows from the Tower of Babel, but you can never strike gold!
That, however, is all the character has going on. I wasn't a huge fan of him changing from body to body. While it was different, I feel it was used poorly, eventually becoming the source of the conflict of the film, as Apocalypse tries to assimilate Charles. Also, they establish in the beginning of the film that he was moving into the body of a mutant with great healing abilities, similar to Wolverine. However, that doesn't explain how his body stayed intact and didn't decompose for thousands of years while being buried underground. If it was the purpose of the armor, then they should have made a point to say that. And what role did his armor serve? To enhance his strength? To protect his body? We don't know because it was never touched upon. Another thing that annoyed me was his power set. Now, I know in the comics, Apocalypse has many powers. However, in the movie, he seems to display certain abilities early on in the film, and then later forgets about them. It made him come off as dumb and inconsistent. As far as a villain, En-Sabah Nur is easily forgettable and is not at all fleshed out as a character.
Real mature.
Alright, let's talk about the Horsemen of Apocalypse. Magneto clearly had the best story arc of the film. When his new family died in the woods, it was truly heartbreaking, and a great performance by Michael Fassbender. As usual, Magneto is the best villain in the X-Men franchise. My only issue with him was his power. How powerful can he get before it seems stupid? In this film, he moves the entire Earth. That's how crazy this movie is. Apocalypse gives him this massive power boost, yet at the end when Magneto betrays and attacks Apocalypse, his power suddenly diminishes as the fight goes on, and that's never explained. Next is Storm. I feel like she's wildly underused in the movie. I wasn't overly fond of how Apocalypse turned her hair white, but whatever. I really enjoyed everything else about her character. I just wish they'd showed more of her throughout the film. She looked really cool when she was wielding the lightning and the weather, and it was awesome. Psylocke and Angel are also incorporated into the movie. I liked Psylocke's look as she wears her comic book outfit, but her character was flat. Same thing with Angel, although I feel like he should have been called Archangel, but whatever. He did look cool with his metal wings. I liked how he could hurl blades from his wings like he does in the comics. However, both of these characters seem to only be bloodthirsty henchmen with no real goals or motivations. Psylocke's powers are way different than her comic book counterpart. In the comics, she can create a blade of psionic energy. This psychic blade can render you mentally paralyzed or in some sort of mental pain. Her blade isn't really supposed to affect the physical world like it does in the film. Also, they never touched on her powers of telepathy. She too has telepathic powers, like Professor X and Jean Grey. One other missed opportunity I'd like to bring up is the awesome fight between Mystique and Psylocke that we never got. It was teased at the beginning of the film, when Mystique threatens Caliban.
Caliban knows it. Mystique.
Why don't you ask your psychics what'll happen if you keep pushing me?
What'll happen?
It would have been a much cooler matchup than Psylocke and Beast. Plus, it would have given Mystique a cool action sequence. Sadly, that wasn't the case. Speaking of Mystique, let's move on to her character. I hated her arc in the film. In Days of Future Past, she was established as a cool and sexy badass with a fleshed out storyline.
We're gonna need Mystique.
Why?
You're a cold-hearted bitch.
Well, don't hold back.
She was mutant and proud. That aspect of her character is completely absent from the film. It's a decision that completely goes against what she stands for in previous movies. She's hardly ever in her blue form, and as I mentioned before, she doesn't have any real action sequences. I know most of this stems from Jennifer Lawrence not wanting to be painted blue, which is kind of ridiculous to me. The only reason they elevated the character of Mystique to this degree is because Jennifer Lawrence is playing her. Jennifer Lawrence just doesn't want to be here, and boy does it show. You can tell that her heart is just not in it.
You got your warplane. Let's go to war.
Welcome home.
This isn't my home.
It was once.
No, it was your home. I just lived here.
And it's a shame because I liked her in Days of Future Past. She was strong, independent, and had this inner struggle that worked great with the character.
You used to be a better shot.
Trust me, I still am.
None of that is present in this movie. Also, they don't address her relationship with Nightcrawler. In the comics, she's his birth mother. When I saw the trailers for this film, I really thought the reasoning behind her not being blue as much would be because she didn't want Nightcrawler to know she was his mother. That storyline would have been much more effective than the lame one we got. Charles Xavier is really good in the film. James McAvoy gives a great performance as usual. Unlike Jennifer Lawrence, McAvoy's character very much reflects his actions in previous films. His dialogue with Moira at the beginning is gold, and from what I've heard, it was ad-libbed. This shows how well McAvoy knows and cares about his character. He was definitely one of the major highlights in the movie. You can feel the compassion and intelligence emanating from his performance.
I've never felt power like this before.
I really liked the telepathic battle between himself and Apocalypse at the end of the film. I thought it was a fantastic way to make Xavier's power set visually pop. It's something we've never seen done in the X-Men films before, and I loved it. And I really felt for Charles when he was about to be assimilated by Apocalypse. I was on the edge of my seat when Apocalypse's consciousness was being transferred into him. Although I wasn't a fan of the movie's decision to have Apocalypse's technology to be the reason for Professor X going bald. They could have just started the movie out with him not having any hair. We as the audience wouldn't need an explanation for his baldness because of who he is. Most non-comic book fans know who Professor X is and what he looks like. It was sort of unnecessary, just like the decision to make Storm's hair turn white when Apocalypse amplifies her mutant abilities. They could have just made her hair white from the beginning instead of explaining something we never needed to know. A younger version of Jean Grey, played by Sophie Turner, was also one of the more positive aspects of the movie for me. I know most people say they didn't like her performance as Jean, but I found it refreshing because it takes the character into a different place. Usually Jean Grey is depicted as a sweet, sexy, popular student of Xavier, but here we're shown a new side to Jean. Here, Jean is an outcast among outcasts. You can tell she's more timid than previous versions of the character, played by Famke Janssen. This Jean is scared of her power and what it's capable of. I found it easier to relate to her character because she was presented as the weird kid in high school that doesn't have many friends because she's different. It's an interesting approach because she's surrounded by other mutants that might feel this way out in the real world, yet Jean can't escape this feeling because of how scary and unstable her powers are.
You're still scared of me.
Hey, I have special glasses now.
They're not scared of you, they're scared of me. You're not the only one who can't fully control your powers.
Wait, so last night, when the house shook, that was you?
Sorry to break it to you, but you're not the biggest freak in the school.
Finally, I have to mention the Phoenix. I feel like people know the Phoenix is a thing, but the majority of people don't know exactly what it is. In the comics, the Phoenix Force is a cosmic alien entity made up from all the psionic energy that exists or ever will exist in the universe. It's one of the most powerful entities in the Marvel comic universe, and it's at its strongest when it bonds with Jean Grey. At this level of power, Jean is able to do pretty much anything. In X-Men The Last Stand, however, the Phoenix is a repressed part of Jean's psyche that is extremely powerful in its destructive capabilities. I'm not a fan of that version. I did like what they did here. It seems like Jean has so much power that she can't control it, and when she lets loose... This is also the first time we've ever seen the fiery bird appear in the movies, and I geeked out when I saw it. Fox is currently working on a Dark Phoenix movie. I hope to God it's better than this movie. Fox has a less than favorable track record, and with the Dark Phoenix movie being pushed back for the second time, it isn't looking too good. I will say that I like the trailer for Dark Phoenix. Cyclops, aka Scott Summers, is okay in the film. He didn't really have much to do. I wish they would focus on Scott and make him more of a leader figure like he is in the comics. His eye blasts were cool, but nothing that we haven't seen before. He was just sort of bland to me. I did like his interaction with Jean Grey, but other than that he was just sort of there because it's an X-Men movie. Nightcrawler was very good in the movie. Cody Smith-McPhee did a really good job bringing him to life. While I didn't particularly care for the tattoos on his face, I did like that he was religious and served as some comedic relief. He had some pretty good action sequences too. I also liked the circus outfit he wore at the beginning of the film. Another character worth watching was Quicksilver. Just like in Days of Future Past, he got another grandiose action sequence. This one is even bigger than the last one. It's full of amazing effects and humor. I admired how this film treated him more like a character and less like a spectacle. I wish he could have had more to do with Magneto's story. Ultimately, he decides to not tell Eric that he's his son, which makes sense in the context of the story. I was also fond of the fight scene between himself and Apocalypse. It addresses the question most people would be thinking. Why doesn't Quicksilver just beat the crap out of Apocalypse? Well, he does, and it's very cool. Agent Moira McTaggart is also a pleasant surprise in the film. It's the exact same character from First Class. Mind you, she really doesn't have anything to do except serve as a love interest for Charles. Her acting was good, and she was a likable character. It's also worth noting that Rose Byrne was pregnant while shooting her scenes, which is interesting to me because she didn't let it affect her acting. Also, Jubilee is in the film for like 5 seconds. They never even showcased her powers. She looked like the character, but sadly, that's all. And yeah, I gotta mention Wolverine. Unless you missed that incredibly spoil-heavy trailer, then you knew he would show up in here. I think I would have enjoyed his cameo more if I hadn't known about it beforehand. And that's all he does here, a cameo. It's also worth noting that the filmmakers didn't even try to expand upon or even acknowledge the cliffhanger in Days of Future Past, where Mystique's disguised as Stryker when she and his men fish him out of the lake. I was excited to see what they were going to do with that, but they didn't do anything. Speaking of William Stryker, he isn't really anything special in this movie. He had a purpose in the film and he fulfilled it. He kidnapped the older X-Men so the younger ones could rescue them and meet Wolverine. There were other little things that bothered me in the film, like when Apocalypse used Charles to send his message to the world. Like, why did he need to tell the people of Earth that he was about to kill most of them? It was kind of pointless. The only reason that they did it was because the movie needed Charles to send Jean a hidden message to know where they were. The speech itself was cringeworthy and made Apocalypse look stupid. Take a look.
You have lost your way,
You have lost your way,
but I have returned.
but I have returned. For there is nothing you can do.
This Earth will be yours.
In conclusion, X-Men Apocalypse is, in my opinion, a huge missed opportunity that could have been one of the better X-Men films. Instead, it went down as one of the worst. Hey guys, don't forget to subscribe, and if you like my review, leave your thoughts down below in a comment and tell me which film you want me to review next. Thanks for watching. I'm Zach, and remember, life is better in 3D.